Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Ganganasadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami.
Dear Seeker of Truth, welcome. This work that we are going to talk about is one of the most sacred dialogues because it happens between two enlightened beings. One is Ashtavakra, the other is King Janaka, which was Ashtavakra's disciple. So in it you will have a glimpse of the instruction of an enlightened being so that you can achieve liberation, and also the vision of how a liberated being stands, acts, what is his experience. So pay attention to these teachings, fill your heart with surrender, devotion, sacredness, because that is the way to enjoy it the most. May it blossom in your heart, may you also find liberation. So let's continue. Ashtavakra Samhita, Chapter 8, Bondage and Liberation. So Ashtavakra continues with his teachings. It is bondage when the mind desires or grieves at anything, rejects or accepts anything, feels happy or angry at anything, because there is the sense of I implied, because there are desires for outcomes, because there are preferences, because it is being taken seriously, because there's identification with the body and the bodily needs, because all of this is still there. So if the mind is desiring something, there's no fullness, there's no bliss, there is illusion of separateness, of separation, so that something can be desired. If it is grieving at anything, it means there were expectations about outcomes coming from the fruit of the same illusion of separate identity, of recognition of the world as real, of identification with the body, and complete experience of duality. So rejecting or accepting anything like that was important. Again, the preferences of outcomes, desires of outcomes, preferences, feels happy or angry at anything. So still circumstantial happiness, the quest for circumstantial happiness, and gets angry when those desires, when those objects of the senses, when those happenings, when those circumstances from which he is imagining happiness coming from, when all these things are taken away, then he gets angry. Or if the circumstance is not taken away, but comes in a way that was not the expected one, So all these are indications of bondage. Liberation is attained when the mind does not desire or grieve or reject or accept or feel happy or angry. There are no more fluctuations in the mind. There's just stillness, there's just fullness. The sense of duality has been completely eradicated. The world has been seen for what it is. The body has been seen for what it is, a nothing. There has been the return to the real identity with the nature of Sat Chit Ananda. Truth, consciousness, bliss. And in this bliss, this fullness, there are no fluctuations, no modifications in the mind, no sense of duality, no identification with bodily needs. There's no taking the scenario, the world, the universe seriously. There's the knowing that there's no universe, there's nothing there. So how can there be desire for something, or grieve when that desire is not fulfilled? Where can there be rejection or acceptance if there's no recognition of something apart from me? Where can there be the feeling of happiness or at being angry? If you're blissful. So duality and oneness, this is the big difference which is being displayed here. The realization of oneness and the experience of duality. Living in the world, in a body, interacting with other bodies, driving the circumstances to expected results in the pursuit of happiness, or in oneness, in the complete, fullest experience of bliss. That it's not really an experience, it is the nature of identity itself. No sense of duality whatsoever. This is liberation. The other one is bondage. Because you cannot desire something or reject something, feel happy or angry or whatever, if you're not taking it seriously. And you cannot take it seriously if you don't depend on it. And you cannot depend on it if you don't believe that you are the body mind. Only by that belief and by the identification of the characteristics of the body, starting with individual identity and then the characteristics of the body. So a lot of the key ingredients are needed for this accepting, rejection, desiring, and feeling happy or angry, grieving, celebrating. A lot of ingredients are needed. And that is in the pot of illusion. So one is liberation, the other is bondage. It is bondage when the mind is attached to any sense experience, It is liberation when the mind is detached from all sense experience. So again, the mind can only be attached to a sense experience if it is the only source of well-being, of pleasure, of happiness, of bliss, because these are all synonymous. All synonymous. Bliss being the nature of reality. So this is what people are seeking, is bliss, but they don't know that. Some can get to the point of happiness. Oh, I want happiness. So they go through relationships, quest for material security or prosperity, and all these things. But if you ask them, what do they want? It is happiness that they imagine that comes from all of that. They cannot reach this vision of bliss. Others want pleasure. They cannot reach happiness. It's pleasure. And pleasure for them is happiness. It's synonymous to that which they are seeking, as happiness is synonymous to that which they are seeking. But ultimately, being bliss, being themselves what they are seeking, through the world, through others. So there must be duality, there must be the sense of separation, there must be the sense of emptiness, there must be the illusion, the absence of self-realization, of your blissful nature. And then in that miserable state, whatever source of pleasure, happiness you find becomes precious and you get attached to it. So whatever resembles the slightest your real nature, that's what you're really looking for. In bondage, you develop attachment to that. And in liberation, no more duality, no more others or other things, so nothing to get attached to. There is the restoration, restoring your natural state, so you become blissful. How nothing else can come even close to that. So it is bondage when the mind is attached to any sense experience, anyone. And it is liberation when the mind is detached from all sense experience, not just one. In the case if there's one attachment, there's no liberation, there's bondage. But if it is detached from every sense experience, there is liberation from all sense experiences. But detachment is practice for self-realization, but it is self-realization that brings real detachment. Remember, these practices are not for self-realization like in a direct way. It's for halting illusion, halting the belief in illusion. So you practice detachment to a high degree, the highest you can. But real detachment is through self-realization. There's a certain degree of detachment that you can reach through your practice, but the fullness of it is through self-realization. And even when you're detaching from anything, you're actually trying to reach self-realization. So it's like a transference, but not a bad one. But it is. So the full detachment is through self-realization. And this is not just about the objects in themselves, but about the experience through the objects and that the beliefs that are there, because it's not that every object brings pleasure. The pleasure is not in the nature of the object. It is in the nature of the subject. So certain things are pleasurable to some people, and the same things are not pleasurable for other people. So this pleasure also has the ingredient of the beliefs of that being, and those beliefs have attachment to themselves. So a lot of ingredients are there, not just one or two. When there is no I, there is liberation. When there is I, there is bondage. Considering thus, easily refrain from accepting or rejecting anything. So in this case, this I is this individual identity, because in reality there's just I. Only I. There's nothing else but I. But in this sense, it's the individual I. So when this individual identity is there, it is bondage. When there is no sense of I, it is liberation. So considering thus, easily refrain from accepting or rejecting anything. And this is implying that all objects are important for the main object. And the main object is the body complex. It's just for the body complex that there are other objects. No one else. Objects don't interact by themselves. So this individual consciousness is at the basis of all. So understanding this, refrain from accepting or rejecting. That means refrain from interacting with the objects and return your attention to the self only. So that this individual consciousness disappears. So understanding that whatever is happening is important or unimportant to the subject. And as long as there is the subject, the individual, I, there is bondage. Once you close the object, the eyes of this individual self to the objects, it creates a distance. Then you can close the eyes to this body complex also, create a distance, and it starts its dissolution. Okay.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.